So, ladies and gentlemen, we have come to our first panel discussion. At this panel, we have with us 3 seasoned HR, people and culture leaders. Entitled Pursuit of Work-Life Optimization, they will discuss how to develop successful initiative by redesigning work mechanics in the organization in order to improve employee well-being while boosting productivity. Our first guest panelist is the head of people and culture at Mindvalley, Marta Kondryn, brought the global movement of Disrupt HR to Kuala Lumpur. She is committed to make the world a happier place to work by building authentic and heart-centered organizations with strong cultures. Our second guest panelist is a transformative HR leader with more than 16 years of experience across diverse geographies in Procter & Gamble and Philip Morris International. Chinmay, who is the Director of People and Culture, plays an integral role to engage and inspire people across the organization in Philip Morris's bold vision of designing a smoke-free future that requires a large-scale culture transformation. Our third guest panelist is currently the Chief People and Culture Officer at Permodalan Nasional Berhad, driving organizational transformation in the human capital space. Norlida Azmi has over 25 years of experience in client and risk management, strategy, and human capital management within international and regional financial institutions and corporations. Her 18-year international stint included Singapore, London, Saudi, Qatar, and UAE. Last but not least, our panel moderator. He is Dr. Azlan, PERKESO's Head of Prevention, Medical and Rehab, who was also our program's keynote speaker who presented earlier this morning. So are you guys super excited with this panel lineup as I am? They are already here in the room and I'm very looking forward for the discussion. This is definitely something that you do not want to miss. So before I hand over to Dr. Azlan, just a gentle reminder that if you have any question for our panel, please feel free to type it in the chat box. Alright, I think our panel is getting ready. We will be back in just a short while, so please stay tuned.
Thank you again, June, for that kind introduction. Welcome everyone to the forum this afternoon, and ladies and gentlemen who are watching on our online forum. Now, ladies and gentlemen, all of you here, today actually is a historical day for me, and I think many of you have not experienced this before. That is to have a forum moderated by a doctor, but panels are all human resource experts. Now, this is the first time for me. I'm not sure whether any of you have experienced this before, because most of the time, if I moderate a session, usually there are doctors who are panels. So this is how I think how the world is actually changing after what we are seeing, of course, with the pandemic and also with the challenge that we are seeing at the workplace in terms of managing well-being of the workers and also actually managing the businesses. So somehow the medical persons and the HR persons have to meet somewhere. And I'm glad that you are meeting here in this forum today. So ladies and gentlemen, we are going to do this in 2 rounds. I've actually prepared the first round questions to all our 3 panels, and then later we shall also open up to questions from the audiences as well. Now, I'm also am very glad because this forum actually is going to follow through the presentation this morning that I gave about the effect of health on the employees and also how workplace plays their role. And I think it is very important that we hear from the organization, the business managers, on how actually can we merge this, getting business running as well as getting health and well-being of the employees being catered to as well. And so, ladies and gentlemen, we have panels from Philip Morris. We also have panels from Permodalan Nasional, as well as Marta, who will talk to us on different aspects of managing employees and also health and well-being. So I'm not going to follow the number of panel assigned by June, I'm going to just throw up my question. And I think the first question that I wanted to ask is to Norlida. And this is what I've always been asked to me by many people. And also, I can also say in the beginning when I started my career looking into health and well-being and employees, and the question that we always have to answer is this. If you want people to give more productivity, then people have to work harder, longer, and therefore their health and well-being are suffering. Is this true? Is this something that we look into businesses? Because do we expect people to work harder, to work more, to the detriment of their health, as long as productivity of the business is certain? And if it's not true, how does Permodalan Nasional handle this?
Thank you, Dr. Azlan. Thank you, staff, for having us on this program this morning. What is really interesting in that question is the perception of do we have to work harder to increase productivity? I think increasingly organizations says that we have to work smarter. I would like to position this productivity on two levers. One is the organizational maturity, and the other one is the individual capacity and capability. I don't believe that there is any organization today that is not going through some adaptation or transformation, given all the disruption that we have had. And this has begun even before the pandemic set upon us. There was the do leaner processes so that you increase efficiency and productivity. And then there is the IR 4.0 that says, how do we change jobs? I think organizations, when they structure the roles, the current role of changes, they have to see whether this is the right tasks and responsibilities accorded to one person, and what is their capability in that. And from the individual, what is your capability and capacity? In Permodalan Nasional Berhad, we have a multi-generational workforce. So the needs and the levers are going to change between those in the 20s who are willing to burn candles at both ends, in the 30s perhaps looking at building, balancing career and family, and in the 40s is, do you put your health last when you want to go to the next level? So you need to be very sensitized to this. I'm not saying that organizations are absolved from their responsibility in creating an ecosystem in a work community that is really, really positive, because we all know, it's now known literature, a very good environment brings engagement and drives productivity. And I think this is a good segue into what we do at Permodalan and some of the learnings and the programs that we want to do. I think physical well-being has been well advanced, where there's a lot of initiatives in let's check your heart rate, your fitness, your steps, and everything else. Nutrition, we know that obesity, for our love of food today, there's increasing awareness on how should we balance it. But mental well-being, I think, needs to be pivoted a little bit more positively. I want to share a little experience I've had. I've just come from a global bank where last year we embraced mental well-being from the global hit center all the way to the countries. And it comes about from building awareness. It comes about from going through learning. It comes about from building the narrative that is not insulting, that doesn't make you feel bad when you have a mental stress situation. And I found that very, very strong. And role modeling, where the leaders, the CEOs, share stories about the vulnerabilities, and this makes it more relatable. So the adoption became stronger. Of course, there's going to be a lot of seminars about what does mental well-being does, but the practice. The other key success factor is to understand that to build a holistic system, it takes time. So I believe that management and all the people that are responsible must have the resilience to know that there are milestones that goes from 3 months, 6 months. So in Permodalan, we are quite fortunate. We have an in-house clinical and health psychologist already, Dr. Sharifa. So I think that itself speaks about where the organization values the staff well-being. There are already initiatives that are physical, the greatest loser about weights, not in performance. And the other one is, of course, nutrition. What we are doing right now is putting through a comprehensive, a more integrated program on how do we drive engagement and productivity. Some people may know that we are moving into Merdeka 118 in 2 years' time. So we want to influence the ways of working that caters, that brings in all the element of physical, mental, psychological, emotional, but also understanding that the physical aspects of the building has to be healthy, the air, the lighting, the ergonomic chairs. But also the last part is that we are part of a community. We are parents. We are caregivers to elders. So we launched our what we call the PNB flexes during the MCO, which is flex time, flex space, flex stress, giving the empowerment and the latitude to our people. What makes you work happier? I'm not a jeans person, but I think some of my millennials says, I want to come in a cool outfit, wear non-high heels that won't cost me health considerations later. We want to give the options. And I think as the demographics of your workplace changes, you have to be very cognizant of putting in programs that will address the different segments of your workplace. And then you can have a more holistic and integrated total well-being program, because I think that will really drive productivity, because they will feel that, oh, the organization cares about me and I want to give back as much as they're giving me. That is my philosophy, and I think the organization supports me in that position.
Right. Just before I move on, I'm interested in the part where we talk about mental health, and I think one of the drawbacks that I found in my practice is that the word mental itself is stigmatized. Somebody can have stress, but once you mention you have a mental stress, then it becomes different. What is your take on that? Do you still talk about mental stress or it's just stress? And most of the time when we talk about mental health is when we have a case of a psychiatrically ill person who does something criminal or something like that, and suddenly the talk about mental health increases, but actually it's not that. So how does PNB takes into this stigma?
So we're very conscious about this. So at the awareness program, we're running a culture transformation program, is we're using our ambassadors within the network to shift and pivot it. It is not a mental condition, but it's mental well-being. And this is where in my previous organization, when the leaders share their vulnerabilities, where they said, oh, my wife went through a difficult depression, it impacted them, and then she shared the story, a lot of people then say, oh, I felt it too. And that impacts, because the minute you're distressed from your family or from your working circle, it then impacts how you perform at work. There are levers, and I've just read somewhere today that, there are 4 levers of emotional, physical, intellectual, and financial, of course, is another one. If one of them goes down, it's bound to pull you down. But the converse is also true. If you make somebody feel secure that I can talk about my problem, then everything gets uplifted. So I think we have to focus on the positivity of it to bring about that change. But you're quite right, Doctor. We have to remove the stigmatization of the word mental illness to just mental well-being.
Exactly. Thank you, Norlida. I think Norlida has just confirmed with me that the workplace environment is very important. If you want to talk about health and well-being, then the managers, the employers must be on board, and that is very important. But then there was a question this morning about having to respond to work demands after hours because of the facility that we have now. So in my answer, I talk about previously we have to answer to emails, and then we created rules that you don't answer emails after work, you wait until the next morning, or you set some time to answer the emails. But now work comes in emails and WhatsApp and Telegram. So somebody actually asked the question this morning, how do you handle that? So this is my question to you, Marta. So we have digitalization, we have a lot of facilities nowadays. I think I'm guilty of that as well during the MCO period. I call for a web meeting. I don't care what time, Saturday and Sundays. I keep on calling my team for a web meeting simply because I can do it. And I think they are all in front of their computer anyway, not going shopping. So how do we manage this? Does digitalization cause more risk to the health and well-being of workers? That's what I wanted to know. How does Mindvalley tackle this?
Very good question. Thank you, Doctor. I think it goes both ways, and the answer can be yes and no to this. It's very important to see that, let's say in the last 3 months, the productivity and the effectiveness of many companies have improved, and the pandemic taught us to completely redefine how we are doing things, and remote work for sure brings a lot more productivity. That is my personal stand, as well as a lot of studies can show you. But also what we can see is that the typical working days has increased by 2-3 hours. That's by default. We work more because we are working from home. And as you said, I can call in the video meeting and the video call whenever I want. Though I wouldn't advise doing that to your team, for sure. And how do we, as managers, as employers, truly set the boundaries, help to set organizational as well as individual boundaries? And it's very important to talk about this at the workplaces. So we in Mindvalley train our managers to help team members to set boundaries. And we are the workforce that is very digitally driven. We are mostly 90% are millennials. So it wasn't difficult for us to go into the new normal, but it is difficult what you're saying, the digitalization of work, the pros and cons of it. And so the very first thing that when we went into this working mode, we did a lot of sharing, and simply sharing easy tips on how to manage your work day, how to organize your day, how to find balance between different priorities of life. And even with sharing simple tips, like for example, there is already this concept of Zoom fatigue, right? Zoom fatigue is something that we all experience when we have meetings back to back, especially if these are video calls. And it's already proven that our brain has to work twice as harder if we are working online, because we don't have the social cues. We don't have the person sitting to us and to read it right on the spot. We have to process it through video. So this makes our brain and mind work twice and 3 times harder compared to if we were in the office environment. So knowing this, how will you organize your day? How will you stay productive and achieve your results and support your organization? So simple tip was don't have all meetings in video, like it's not required. Focus on just an audio call, or don't schedule meetings back to back. Or some departments were also organizing, okay, this is our deep work time the whole day. We don't do any meetings. We just want to focus on getting things done instead of meeting or creativity or brainstorm. So we would allow company to self-organize in the way to see what's the dynamic of the team, what's the dynamic of the employees. I also read recently that overall the digital work truly impacts our decision making, and unfortunately not in a good way. So there was a study of these court members who, when they would have to make a decision online or over the video, they would be less understanding and less compassionate, unfortunately. So understanding the cons of this is very important for us as leaders. And now, as we are entering more relaxed MCO and slowly coming back to the office, it's also very important to ask your team members what work preferences they have. And in fact, we did the survey, and only 20% of the team wants to be back in the office, to work from the office. The rest still prefer to work from home or remotely from anywhere. So we were designing our workplace in a way, okay, if we have only 20% of the workforce, how will we run this company? How will we communicate? Will we still need the physical office space? So these were our challenges that came in. And I'm very grateful because our organization truly sees the person as the whole, and personal growth and transformation is at the core of what we do as a business and as well to our employees. So we take it very seriously and we listen to employees a lot, and we would combine the business needs but also have employees' needs at the first. So that's why we took a decision that we will not ask everyone to go back to the office, only to those who want. And yeah, I'm lucky to say that our business allows us. Not every business can do that. So if your business can do it, I encourage you to ask your team as well, what do they want? So this has been our challenge, and in this time, what I understood for myself and for my team, it's very important to listen. It's very important to really walk the talk about the well-being of employees, and especially in these times. And we as workplaces truly need to be more compassionate about that. And that's why I think these forums and overall what you and Doctor are talking about, the well-being of employees, it's so important. It goes beyond more than compassion. It goes about, through this, we can grow our businesses if we take care of our employees. And I can say that at Mindvalley, we truly take care of that. One of the things is that we have also our coaches and therapists in-house who would talk about these things, who would help to overcome traumas for employees. We have a lot of programs about well-being in terms of diet, physical health, goal setting. So we provide a lot of space as well for our employees to experience the same. And we always say, if you join Mindvalley, you will become the fittest, the healthiest, with the best sleep that you can get. So this is the promise that we have towards our employees as well. One of our employer brand promises.
Thanks, Marta. I really like Zoom fatigue. I thought Zoom fatigue is when we tried everybody to mute their microphones. But actually, I have to agree because the MCO period gives a lot of experience about meeting through web-based meetings, and there are people who try to do long meetings, and it's very, very tiring trying to sit down and trying to listen to everything that the person speaks on the web, on the seminar. And you are right again, because I do agree that you have to be 3 times more concentration to actually listen to what are being spoken of. But I'm interested to know just a little bit more. When you talk about training your managers to do the limitation, basically trying to answer the question I had earlier about people having to answer work questions after work hours. How does the Mindvalley promote that, especially among, I think in organizations that I've seen, usually the top management understands, the workers want it, but the middle management still do it. So how do you handle these groups?
In our case, it really needs to start with the top management, with the senior managers. And if we have an agreement as a team, as a department, that we are allowed not to reply to work email or work message on WhatsApp after 6 or 7, we all agree about that and we don't reply. So it all starts with the leaders having an agreement. Because if they won't, then it will be very hard for you to make this change as HR person, for example, in my case. So it also goes hand in hand, what type of culture do you cultivate? And it's very easy to slip through this if the times are stressful. So all of a sudden, the whole organization starts working hard, non-stop, working hours increasing, right? But then leaders' responsibility is, okay, what type of culture do we want to cultivate? what is our stand about the well-being of our employees? And do we agree that we need to teach employees and lead an example of setting boundaries? If this is the type of culture that you have, then it will be easy. If you want to build it, then you have to find champions. But if in truth your culture doesn't support it, no matter what you say, have boundaries, do this, do that. If the culture is not about that, it will be impossible to do.
So I think I can conclude this by saying that my question was not exactly right. So digitalization does not cause the detriment of health and well-being of the workers, but you can actually control it. It's a tool of working, and like any other tool, it can be managed. Really.
Absolutely.
Yeah. I have to move on to Chinmay now. Chinmay, I've been in this field for more than 20 years, I can tell you that. And for the past 20 years, we keep on talking about mental health. I've been, before I joined PERKESO, I was a researcher, and we researched stress among police, among teachers, among managers, and they're all stressed. Right? I can conclude with that, really. So we've been talking about stress, we've been talking about mental health for a long time. And now, in year 2020, we are still talking about stress. Just last month, we had a session such as this, and this was an international event, and we were asked to talk about caring prevention. And I searched for what does caring prevention means. I cannot find what is caring prevention. So in the end, during the discussion with the host, they are talking about prevention that looks into well-being, including mental well-being. So for years and years and years, we are talking about mental well-being among employees everywhere. But we are still talking about it. What are we missing, really? Why are we still talking about it? It's a difficult question. For me, it's difficult. How come we have not handled this for more than 2 decades already?
Thank you, Dr. Azlan and Star. It is indeed a difficult question. And I'm not sure I can give a perfect answer to it, but I would like to reflect on the evolution of work and the lives of workforce, so to say, in the last 2 to 3 decades, before we really dissect or we come to a conclusion on how this problem should be addressed. Now, as far as I remember, when I was growing up, I never heard my parents talking about mental health issues or stress issues, and those days they were working 6 days a week. Okay, so it was different. But I guess those days for them, switching off from work was not very difficult. And that kind of, gives an indication how the work lives were. Now, if you look at the internet era, which started somewhere around mid-90s, that's when things started changing. So one data point that I will give to you is before the internet era, if you look at the list of, let's say, Fortune 500 companies, and you look at the list today, 50% of the companies don't exist today. So essentially, when the technology came, the pace of change became much, much faster. And this whole push on productivity, efficiency, suddenly became, the in thing. This whole talk around doing more with less came into being. And it was a question of basically surviving in this extreme competitive world, and technology basically fast-tracked it. So you can see how this whole work thing has evolved in last 20-25 years. Now, if you look at the workforce, what has changed in the last, again, I would say 2 decades or so, if you dissect the lives of the workforce in good old days, and again, I go back, I don't have to go back look at many examples. If I look at, my home and, my parents, because they were also, my dad was in a bank, those days, your work, your family, your friends, your colleagues, everything was in the same city. Okay, so you had a full social ecosystem around you, and this thing of moving outside of your city or outside of your country to work used to happen, but not very frequently as we see today. Okay, and this advent of globalization, you started seeing workforce becoming much more mobile. Okay, so this whole social ecosystem that they had started changing. And interestingly, with technology, social media kind of tried to fill that space, but unfortunately did not help, because it kind of created, I would say, a peer pressure on people to be maintaining a different identity, leading perfect lives in that world. Essentially, we got into a situation wherein this whole evolution has moved so fast that it created the issues that we talk about, health and wellness at the workplace. Now, if you look at how the corporate world has responded to it, I started working in 2003. Okay, so those days I remember the talk of the town, especially in the corporate world, was work-life balance. Okay, and there was a lot of effort on how can we ensure people maintain balance on work and life. And soon company realized that it was not a concept that they should be chasing, simply because there is no balance. Okay, the reason being, they were trying to do a lot of things, or we were at that point of time trying to do a lot of things, and in the employee opinion survey, nothing was changing in this course. And the reason was, fundamentally, we were not changing the workload of people. So if you're not addressing the workload of people, you're expecting more from them, you cannot talk about balance, because there is an imbalance, okay, and it's caused by extreme competitive pressures. The discussion then evolved, and it moved to work-life integration. Okay, how can we create an environment or that same ecosystem for people so that their work and lives are integrated? Again, I think it was a concept being followed for a few years, did not work. And you see there was a wave when, companies started putting infrastructure in offices like gym, like mother's room, like creches. Some companies, new age companies, technology companies went a step further. They started creating sauna and spa and everything. But at the end of the day, you still needed that social ecosystem, right? You will not spend your 24 hours in the office. So this whole concept of work-life integration pursued did not move the needle, I would say, to a large extent. And today, I would say, or maybe in the last 5 years or so, this topic, the way the conference is designed, it says work-life optimization. That's what we have been talking about, work-life optimization or effectiveness. So how can you ensure that people are effective at managing both their work as well as life? And if either of it is not managed properly, there is an imbalance, and that imbalance then leads to, financial issues, physical well-being, you can say social well-being, eventually leading into mental well-being issues or mental health issues. Now, at least there is a realization that, there is this imbalance, and how can we tackle that? Now, if I specifically reflect on my company and in terms of how we have kind of taken on this journey, 4 or 5 years back when we started on this industry transformation, when we started moving as a conventional tobacco company towards smoke-free alternatives, it required a big transformation, not just in terms of our products, but also in terms of our people practices, because it always has to start from the business that you're trying to do. And 5 or 6 years back, we started introducing things like flexi working, okay, flexi hours. In some countries, we went to 4.5 working days, and it came to Malaysia also eventually. We started moving into work from home arrangements. Okay, it was always an issue because those days the appreciation of work from home was still not there, and managers were still pretty much focused on this aspect of physical presence, amounts to performance in the workplace. And I would say in the last couple of years, and recently I would say in Malaysia also, we have introduced what we call as employee assistance programs, okay, which is mainly focusing around mental health. Now the challenge that we have on this part is it's easier, it's very easy to just introduce a program. The challenge is always the uptake. And as you said, there is always a stigma attached to this when you talk about mental well-being. The thing is, the first step before we introduce these programs is to how to normalize this discussion around mental health. How can we talk about it as any illness that exists in the society or any illness that exists in our lives? And today, if you ask me, our focus while we have introduced the program is mostly to ensure that there is an enough awareness and comfort factor around talking about these issues openly. And you don't have to wait to extreme issues wherein you wait for some extreme incident to happen. How can you ensure that it's normalized? You find champions to talk about it. You get experts to talk about it. But the first and foremost thing is to create awareness and normalize the discussion around this in the society. That's how I see it. Now it's not a solution in itself, but it's going to be a journey. But the first step is creating awareness and having a very open and honest conversation around it.
Thanks, Chinmay. I really like the fact that you highlighted that it's an evolution, the management of mental health in the workplace. So, talk from the work-life balance and work-life until we end up with work-life optimization. I wonder whether over the next 5 years we're going to have a different way to try and tackle this. And I think that really brings about to my question earlier, why are we still talking about it after 20 years? Because it looks like we are still finding an answer. Yeah, and that's very important for everyone to understand, because we are not only what is happening in the businesses, in the corporate world, but we're also looking at what is happening in the society as well, at the social level, whether the mental illness are being tackled by the Ministry of Health, for example. Organizations such as SOCSO, we've been asked to look into this for many times, compensation-wise as well, which I said, look, we can't compensate for stress, but we can compensate to what happened after the stress, but not for the stress. I can't measure really. But these are a lot of things that's happening, I think, and it's going to evolve even further. Now, let me get back to Norlida. We have a little bit more time. At the moment, I think for all three panels really, I think we must touch on COVID-19. We must touch on what happened during COVID-19. And for us in our organization, we have learned a lot really. For example, when we talk about working from home, that is during the MCO, it's a first experience for my organization to allow people to work from home. And we get many types of response. Some people actually work, some people don't really work. Those are new experiences that we learn, and we continue on during this recovery MCO. But I want to know, what are the other things? What are things that you've learned as an organization during the COVID-19? It's a once-in-a-lifetime experience. Hopefully we don't experience it again. 100 years, we get to do it once. So let's see what has been learned in each of the organizations. I'll start with you, Marta.
It's a very interesting question. We realize that this is the biggest pilot ever on many fronts. Leadership, agility, and everything else. Whilst a survey doesn't say anything, we participated in a pulse survey that measured what is the leadership direction and clarity during these uncertain times. That was very, very important to our staff. Like, is the business going to continue? Do you care about me? So that was important. The other dimension was, how did the managers or the work system show and executed and delivered their duty of care? Did the managers spend time from the Zoom? How are you? Are you okay? Can I schedule this? Are you putting your kids to school or things like that? So there was enough demonstration. So I think that was very, very important, and also because we do have in-house psychologists, so there was enough of resources either in-house or within the community. So those were the three dimensions that I think we scored very well. What was interesting was that, what is our agility in terms of the digital world? Because we had just given people laptops, and that was easier. You could buy or lease. But what about your data information to make work from home effective when you've not digitized or your digitalization journey has begun? And if you've exposed them to Zoom, we've never really given them a training. So it was an uptick right up. So do you pin this person who's speaking on that? This may seem very simple, but I think increasingly the people managers were also being put on the spot. So we learned the positive things is that the leadership could give clear messages, and our workforce demonstrated agility. So what we're doing now, right now, is how do we leverage up from that we continue to do that duty of care. And where I find the challenge now that we're managing is a hybrid of on-site and remote workers. So how do we build that sense of team spiritness? There's no isolation. So I think this is where we need to navigate closely. And I do think COVID-19, as unfortunate as it is, let's leverage on what we have learned, and that there's a huge amount of care in our organizations like PNB. We have a lot of people who've been there a long time. They take pride in delivering as an internal community. So how do we put the new elements? And I think, Doctor, that was the positive things. And in the negative, it's okay. At least we know what are the pain points. Let's address it.
So Marta, your take on this?
So there were a lot of silver linings, as we call them, in the situation. And if I were to think about key ones, I would highlight two. Number one, even we were extremely well-run and comfortable remote organization before, and overall like very effective business-wise, we still were forced to disrupt a lot. And I think a lot of businesses, in order to survive, you had to disrupt yourself in many senses. Not only, I'm not talking about HR in general, but business, how you run, how you communicate, what you do, the pivot all of a sudden that you need to have as a business. And I'm very proud to say that because of us being very sensitive to the situation and monitoring, listening, we were able to pivot literally every day. That's the type of model we are in, business model, I mean. So we had to navigate every day. And this meant even changing our yearly objectives, like our strategy, our vision as well, pivoting to that. For example, we have a business events side of business, and we run like 1,000 people event every year somewhere in the world, and we were very proud of it. And all of a sudden, we couldn't do it anymore. So how do we change it? It's a lot about the mindset disruption, the business disruption. That was the number one for us. And number two was leadership model. I think the leaders, how they had to lead through this time was very different. Let's say, you cannot motivate anymore, I believe, in this time. You have to be very vulnerable and honest, and upbeat messages will not work. You need to be honest and say, hey, I might not know the answer right now. I'll find it tomorrow, or the situation will change tomorrow. Let's not hang out to the plans or to the decisions just because we made it today. Tomorrow things may change, and leaders need to be very good at admitting that with their teams and to themselves. So the leadership model, as I said, no upbeat messages, but open communication, being very compassionate and listening to your people and knowing what's happening to them, not only at work, but outside, how they are. We have a lot of team members who don't have families, and their families might be somewhere far away. And leaders need to be attuned to this and understand that my team member might really feel isolated and lonely. How do I support them? So two things for us: the disruption across all levels and leadership model as it was before.
Thank you, Marta. Chinmay, your turn.
I would quickly highlight, amongst many, the biggest one that comes for us is also leadership. I think the fact that for these 3 months where you had different lockdowns or MCOs across the world, 70% of our workforce was sitting at home, and still there was no big major productivity loss. And the fact that leaders went through this experience firsthand, it kind of changed a lot of paradigms. You know, this whole concept of the skepticism that existed around work from home went away. And the whole sense of empathy was much higher, because everyone, doesn't matter what level you were sitting locked in a home and having the same challenges as everyone else. And that has, I think, created a paradigm shift in terms of now how the company is looking at the future of work. We call it smart work. And essentially, we are moving from working from office to working from home now to working from anywhere. And that's a big shift, I think, which COVID has brought, and we'll see how it evolves, but it's going to be interesting, exciting, and challenging times for, I think, all the HR professionals.
Thank you, Chinmay. I think two themes came up. One is leadership. Everybody talks about the management, how management responds. And I think surprisingly, we also realized the agility of our workforce in handling these issues. I think we are all optimistic that once recovery ends and life backs to normal, probably work life is not as normal as before. Yes, so that's very interesting. So we are glad that we are here during pandemic and do not get the COVID-19. All right. Okay, let's open up to the questions. Here is a question. Some people do not open up to their family, friends, and colleagues, and then they implode one day. So how can we identify people with issues at work but do not voice out and then break down out of nowhere? So I would like to address to Chinmay this question because you spoke about EAP just now.
Yeah, I think this is exactly the facility that we now are providing to our employees, wherein they have someone that they can talk to. And I think the biggest thing is we don't have to say that you only have to talk to someone when you are really landing into a big issue. It can be anything. It can be a regular work-related issue with your colleague, with your manager, with your subordinate. And if that experience is not good enough, find someone to talk to. As I said, the whole social ecosystem around us is today extremely broken. And I think this whole MCO has also taught us not to take our social ecosystem for granted, not to take our friends, family, colleagues for granted, because we really miss the social interaction during this part. So if you don't have anyone that you can find, that you can talk to, and if your company is providing an employee assistance program, make use of it. That's what I would say.
Right. If the company has got a psychologist on board, then that's like Mindvalley as well as PNB, and that is already done. But what about companies that does not have an on-board psychologist? How does managers or the employers address the questions now? Norlida.
I just, when I was with that global bank, we did not have an in-house psychologist. So what was very important, the education that they subjected all of us to was how do your colleagues and your managers pick up the cues? Then they say, and it's just not one conversation that's going to draw them out or help them resolve. They also say, how many times should you be clued in? Some of these things you think you take for granted, doctor, but it's not. Sometimes you're in a hurry to go and do something. You really have to give your colleagues the gift of your presence. I'm here to listen to you. Try not to look at your phone and all that. And these are things that we take for granted. But I think, doctor, we need to have our own working system to pick up the cues.
So managers need to learn how to pick up the cues.
Yes, and colleagues.
Yes, and colleagues have to learn to pick up the cues from the managers.
Yes.
Yes.
Two ways, doctor. You're absolutely right.
Okay, our next question is from Harry, and I think, Marta, this is for you, really. Is it possible for companies to make it illegal to contact staff after office hours?
Well, I think in Malaysia context, it won't be possible, but if you were somewhere in Europe, probably yes. Right? And I think in France, it's already part of employment law that after working hours, you cannot message and email. So France is already spearheading that. But I would encourage people to have a conversation, to speak about it. Sometimes our leaders, managers, CEOs, they might not even realize that this might cause stress, right? When I receive this message, I want to reply immediately, but maybe our CEO doesn't even expect immediate reply, right? So having this as a part of conversation and asking maybe your manager, how should I go about it? How should I build my working day? That could help.
Thank you, Marta. So, Harry, France is a good place to move if you're talking about that. But I think that this is about being understanding between the managers as well as work colleagues. After work, you might actually send the question, but don't expect the answer immediately, isn't it? So that's a very important thing. But here's another one. I think this one I'm going to address to Chinmay because it touched on work-life balance here. So we're shortening the daily 8 work hours to maybe 6 hours a day contribute to a more balanced work life. maybe Malaysia should consider this in the near future?
It's an interesting question. See, if you look at all the white-collar jobs, I think this concept of work hours doesn't exist because technology has blurred the line between work and life. And it's now actually 24/7 if you look at it this way. But if you are in a manufacturing job on the shop floor, then it's a difficult one because then you are basically you address one issue, then you land into productivity issues, and then you will struggle to attract investment in Malaysia and so on and so forth. I think the most important part is instead of focusing on work-life balance in terms of hours, is we need to ensure that we are effective. We have some priorities for our work and for our life, and we are effective at managing those priorities. And sometimes having more hours may not be the only solution.
Right. Thank you. Okay. There goes another one. This next question is from Karthik. What kind of popular wellness offerings are practiced by Ms. Norlida and Ms. Marta in their organizations? Thank you. So, you can start, Marta.
For us, we have a mental well-being program. So we have in-house coaches and therapists who would support the well-being of the employees at any time. You can have a conversation. You can coach. You can get coaching. We also have programs where we all, it's called 10X, it's a physical health and wellness program where you are trained a short interval training and that helps to build the muscle strength and endurance. So we have a trainer who would train the team in-house on that. We do a lot of community work in terms of employees. So employees would team up and do a diet for 90 days. They would have a special food diet together and they would keep each other accountable. So we encourage a lot of accountability among employees. That helps. So it's not top-down all because organization side, but it's a circle of support. So these are the biggest ones. We do have others and I can go maybe some other times.
All right, maybe we move to PNP.
So the programs are very similar in terms of doing the physical and the counselor I mentioned, but I think there's an angle I think that's very important to us is financial well-being that contributes a lot to stress. So as an investment organization, we do provide that financial well-being counseling because, if you think about the life cycle, start planning for your retirement when you're a millennial rather than wait. So there's a lot of stress that comes from your financial well-being that I think it's almost in the Maslow needs, very basic. I need to know that I have financial viability going forward. So I think that's very key, complementing the other wellness programs.
All right. Shall we take another one? Okay. So this is a question from Masni. What are the activities that we can have if to embrace mental well-being of the staff? Question: hire a counselor. All right. So I'm gonna have Chinmay. You start first, and then maybe the Marta or Norlida, because Norlida has already answered about the counselor, so maybe Marta can take the second one.
Hiring a counselor is probably just one of the solutions. But the thing is, you have your colleagues sometimes that you trust, your friends. The most important thing is that you have someone that you can share as to what you're going through. If you go through any unpleasant experience at work, do you have someone that you can talk to? Whether it's your HR, whether it's your manager, whether it's your colleague. And if none of these people can help you or you trust, then going to a counselor is not an issue. Because asking for help when you really need it is important versus, getting caught into the cycle of, stress building up and eventually having a major imbalance in your work and your lives.
Your comments, Marta?
I would say that a part of having the programs that we mentioned, it's very important that companies also make a conscious stand that they will support the well-being and personal growth of employees. That's the very first step. And again, we will come back to leaders and managers. If as a part of leadership way, you put one of the principles is to deeply care for your team, to lead with love, compassion, and empathy. If your leaders will embody that, I think this will help a lot for team members to feel, and maybe you will not end up hiring a counselor because the manager will have this trustful relationship in the team and with the manager. So this can be a way out too.
So hiring a counselor is not the only answer, it's one of the answers. Okay, I'm going to take two more questions. The next one is from Sharifa, and I think Norlida is the best person to answer this. So what is your advice for big organizations? How do we reach down to a big workforce and make the management walk the talk?
Doctor, this is a very opportune question because at this juncture, PNB is looking at integrating all these initiatives into a strategic plan. It can never be seen like, oh, in the month of April, I do this activity and then it dies off and then you come off end of the year. I think events don't make for adopting and embracing your commitment and organization's commitment to the well-being of the staff. And that's why we have this program that we're going to be launched next month. Is a total well-being that encompasses 8 elements. And like I said, when we go into Merdeka 118, we want to make sure that the physical, mental, psychological, environmental, and community well-being is taken care of. And how do you make leaders adopt it? You can't make leaders to do it. The leaders have to be convinced. You can't force something that's not natural to them, but I'd like to believe that you bring leaders and people into the organization that have the same values that you're looking for. So we are quite fortunate in PNB in that we have that strong commitment from the leaders. And I think you also need to work top down and bottoms up. So that's why we're using your ambassadors within the system. And for us, we'll use our culture ambassadors to reach all the various pockets, to address people that are located beyond a home office in KL, to reach people from different generations or type of works, because we do have some knowledge workers and some non-knowledge workers. Their needs and their stresses are very different.
Right. So even with that commitment, the planning must be solid, really, and long term.
Absolutely.
Okay, we're going to take the last question, and for this one, I would like all panel to give a short answer because it's a very interesting question. And this question is about people who are working from home. So how do you change the mindset of employers that we are trustworthy, and I assume we means we workers are trustworthy, and are producing our work even when we are working from home, and stop micromanaging the employees as it will result in unnecessary stress. So we allow them to work from home, but then we micromanage them and they become stressed. Might as well work from the office. I'm going to start from the end. Marta, you start first. Just a quick one.
It's already happening. So we are working remotely, right? So it's a lot about the employers and the managers finding the balance of trusting employees no matter what, and creating the systems where you can see the results, where you measure effectiveness not by how many hours the employee works, but the output, the value, the commitment.
Really putting to test when you say professional trust. It's a two-way trust of employee to employer and employer to employee, and measure really from the outcomes and be realistic on the expectations. Otherwise, it's not going to work. Micromanaging is going to cause stress beyond repair, I think.
Regardless whether at home or at the office.
Absolutely, Doctor.
Chinmay.
I think this was always an issue, and to Marta's point, this has already started happening because of the COVID. And now I think managers have data for last 3 or 4 months that they can rely on, that how the organization performed when it was not physically present in the office. So it has, I think, impacted the mindset in a big way. Now, whether it is sustainable, we have to see. And I hope we don't have to wait for the second wave of COVID.
Okay, thank you very much, everyone. I think
Thank you.
it is very useful. I've learned a lot. I'm really glad to be here, sitting with the 3 panels here, because I'm not sure about everyone out there, but I do have learned a lot about all these questions that you've asked and how organizations are managing mental well-being of their workers at the workplace and now at home as well. So like what Chinmay said, finally, let's not wait for the second wave or the second pandemic to learn more. We've learned a lot. So it's time to put all this learning into practice. So let me hand over back to June. Thank you very much, everyone, and have a very good day.